It's time for the Uncommon Wealth bonus content.
Hello and welcome everybody to the bonus content for Rayma Dinnen. You're listening to the Uncommon Wealth podcast. I've been your host, Philip Ramsey, and still your host, and right here, doing the deal.
Yeah.
All right, Rayma Dinnen, just got done talking to her. Amazing, huh?
Huge.
Right?
Yeah.
I know. I really do think that she is one of the most uncommon people I know.
For sure.
And we unpacked a lot. Here's what I wish I would have done different. I know Rayma so well. She's my aunt. We talk not as often as I probably want to, but we talk often.
Yeah.
And what I wish I would have done is like let you kind of unpack so you could have got to know her a little bit, right? Without me like leading.
I'm on the same seat as the listeners. I'd never talked to her before.
Right.
But with that, I also could have seen myself like taking this like Joe Rogan style
4 hours later. Right.
And
okay.
I know you listeners don't want a 4-hour podcast from us.
But I mean, you know,
But it would have, like, looking at her story,
there's a lot there.
there's a lot there.
Yeah.
I think people would actually want to listen to.
Yeah. And like we just usually we try to hit record as soon as we can right after the conversation.
Yeah.
But we had a little lapse of technical issues. So we had to talk. And you were like, she was a trauma 1 nurse.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about front lines.
Right? And, like, in Chicago.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that's a lot.
That's
right
a lot.
there. Like, I just want to, like, the things that this woman has had to see and the trials that she had to be going through, like, that would test anybody.
Truly. And like, you talk about like high pressure. I have found this out about myself, not to make about myself, but urgent and important, you know, those 2 quadrants,
Yeah.
urgent and important, like that is what a trauma nurse deals with.
Yeah.
Urgent and like very important. Like people are losing hands and arms and lives.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And so talk about like high stress. And like you could tell, like she is just born calm, like she's calming, but she's authoritative.
Yep.
Like you can tell, like people would look to her in a very like stressful situation.
Yeah.
What's her demeanor? Right.
When she was telling her story, and I'm like wrapping everything together because I wasn't talking a lot because I was just like soaking it in. But the fact that like she went to Africa 3 times, that's a big deal, right?
Yeah.
And then she's like in her new path of like her faith.
Yep.
And the 3rd time, she's leading it.
Right.
Like I hopefully you guys caught that too, because I caught that. I'm thinking, oh, by the 3rd time, I feel like I'm just gonna like
Coast. Right.
Well, not coast, but like finally feel like I have like I'm experienced.
Right.
I know what's gonna happen here. You're gonna see my best self now, because my first time, like I'm just gonna be like frazzled.
She almost left. She almost got on the plane right back. Just come on back.
Yeah, that was the first time though. You know, it's like,
right.
But I still like I would have been like, oh my gosh, okay. Second time I was like, all right, this is all familiar again.
Right.
3rd time I would have been like, all right, guys, I'm who the leaders can like lean on and go point and do and all that. Not leading it.
Yeah. Rayma's leading it.
She's leading it.
Yeah.
So
Right.
that's incredible.
Well, I would just say that she leads out in anything that she does. That's something that I kind of caught. Like whether it's her faith, whether even like the new age stuff that she was doing before this, like people looked at her as a leader. Her nursing,
Yeah.
I know people looked at her as leader. And then now faith, like people look at her as a leader. Like that is a God-given gift that God has given to her and that she's utilized. Now she's utilizing it for the kingdom.
Yeah.
Which is so cool.
It's so cool.
But also like she's super passionate, but she's not like, let me tell you, and kind of like she's not winsome in it because she's so transformed in it. Does that make sense? There's a lot of people who are like, will talk the talk, but then you're like, you see actions. You're like, wait a second.
Doesn't add up.
That doesn't add up. I'd say Rayma's almost the exact opposite. Like where her actions are almost so powerful that you're like, what do you believe in? Because I want to believe in the same way.
Yeah.
Right. And so what an encouraging thing. And then just thinking about just her testimony after she knows Jesus and calling her ex-husband when she didn't really unpack that, but like there was nothing that she would rather do worse than that. Like she was like, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, you could tell. Like, I don't know the story. I mean, I learned everything on the podcast, You could tell, like, oh my God, this is a guy, as a other fellow guy, like, you just want to go, like, break his kneecaps.
Right.
And
yet she's calling him to share the gospel with him.
That's crazy.
And her thought, and it was interesting, like, she got emotional. Like, she was praying that he would be saved.
Yeah.
And God used her to do it.
Yeah.
And if you know anything about the Bible, it kind of reminds me of Paul when he was like this really high figure in the Jewish community, and God changes his life. It was Saul. Now he turned to Paul, changes his life. And he's like, now I'm going to go have you go preach to the Gentiles, which is the opposite of Jews. And you got to be thinking, like, wait, I know a lot, like, I should be doing it for Jews, not for Gentiles.
Yeah.
Well, that's not what God wants. And so basically God was like, I'm going to use you, Rayma, to go preach to the person that, like, is probably the least likely of your mind to do, and convicted her, and she's obedient. Like, that's the part where I know in my life there's been times where I've had a pull or push, and I'm like, and justify reasons why I'm not going to do it. Not Rayma Dinnen. She just went in full throttle.
Full throttle. And, like, I mean, we didn't get too far into it because, time, and then she probably didn't want to, but even, like, you could see the narcissism come out on him when she said it. Like, yeah, I've been a good person my whole life.
Yeah.
And you're like, what? I just learned you've been putting sugar in her gas tank.
Right.
Multiple times.
Ruining cars.
Yeah,
Right.
ruining cars. Like, you're not a good person.
Right.
But then for her to, like, at the funeral learn, and then at church hearing it, it's just like, wow, like, it shows you the power that God can work. Because, got through that.
Right. Right. And I remember talking to Rayma about her husband specifically, and her like, well, I don't know if he had a true conversion. I don't know if he truly understood what he was doing. And I was like, Rayma, like, we're not the judge. That makes sense. And so, but God is, and what you are doing, we're obedient in that calling.
Yeah.
What an amazing thing that, like, that's the way God handles it. Like, we don't have to be the eternal judge. We just have to love people well.
Yeah.
And she's been doing it for quite some time.
Well, that's like, I mean, can you imagine the amount of wisdom she has?
Oh.
'Cause I'm just over here stunned. One, of, like, unwrap so much more in the fact of all the things that she's seen.
Yep.
And then you sit there and think, like, okay, then she had an abusive husband.
Yep.
And through all that, it's like, wow, you still are kicking. And you still have hope for society.
Right.
And I think it is, like she would said, like, multiple times, like, it's Christ. You know?
Oh, for sure. But I do think that's important because she almost poured herself out too much.
Yeah.
And her body was kind of like telling her, like, you can't run that hard anymore.
Yeah.
But by golly, if it's still not hard for her to say no, because she's like still wants to keep doing it. Like, that's all she knows. And it was cool that she kind of gave a mention to her mom and her grandmother, because they were like hardworking, strong women.
Yeah.
And that's like what she just knows.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things about like the way that you parent, the way that you go about life, that your kids are picking up on.
Yeah.
The good and the bad.
Yep.
Right. But man, what a amazing interview. What an amazing woman.
That's awesome.
And the fact that she constantly is trying to improve other people's lives by serving them. Like, how could this not be somebody we have on the podcast?
Yeah. I still can't get over it. I think the one that sticks out the most, like, there's so much, but like more of the funny one that I'm going to take away is the fact that she, talking about, like, when I get old, and I'm getting there. And I was like, oh, I'm not trying to be like that person, but like, I'm like you're there, but like, cause I'm not, and I say that out of love in the fact that I'm just trying to make it to 74 or 75. And you're sitting there saying, I'm almost there to getting old. And I'm like, I'll be in a wheelchair by the time I'm 74.
Yeah. That's
awesome.
It's just a mindset thing that you could tell that she's just like living life well. And so kudos to her. And like her body, she probably won't say it, but like it was kind of dicey there for a second.
Yeah.
Just scary. Like when you can't see and things are not working accordingly, how scary that is. But yet we're going to do this podcast.
Yeah.
So thanks again, Rayma, for just blessing us with your wisdom. I know that
great.
I appreciated it, but I know
really
a lot of our listeners appreciated it. And may it not be about finances, but it was about finances.
It is about
it's
finances.
just about how you live your life.
Yeah.
And the fact that she's still running harder and faster than she ever has is a testimony that what a perfect opportunity that we have and people have in retirement, where you don't have to worry about money anymore. Now you can really focus on pouring yourself out for others. And so thanks for listening. You've been listening to the Uncommon Wealth Podcast. I've been your host, Philip Ramsey.
And I'm Aaron Kramer.
Thanks for listening.